Welcome to the Jameson Files. I'm your host, Carrie Weber. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode, or perhaps for the first time. However you are watching or listening, we are certainly so glad to have you with us as we continue to bring information and resources and experts to you to help you be as productive, as profitable, and as fulfilled in your dental practicing life as you can possibly be. And today I am so excited. We are coming to you from the Jameson offices in Oklahoma City, and look who I have here. Our dear friend and colleague in the dental realm, Lois Banta. Lois.
So excited to be here, and my first time doing this with you. And
a
real honor, very exciting, and I'm sure we'll share a few giggles.
Maybe so. We just need to try and keep ourselves under control. We'll see. I don't know.
We'll try.
There are no rules in this. So, I'm just so glad to see you face to face, to have you in the room with me, and just excited because Lois is with us. Surprise to surprise, because we have collaborated together and we have Lois as a guest educator and presenter on the Grow Pathway that is launching as we speak, on the very popular and needed topic of how to navigate PPO relationships in your practice. And just going to be a phenomenal resource for all of you that are on Jameson's Grow learning platform. Very excited to share your knowledge with the members of Grow. But today we're going to dip our toe into that topic a little bit because it only seems right to keep carrying forward the conversation that we've started here about PPOs, how to navigate those relationships, how to make healthy decisions about your relationship with PPOs in your practice. Do you have one? Do we need to perhaps step out of one? Do we need to do something different in the months and the years to come to help you in your pursuit of your ideal practice vision? Really, that's what it all comes down to.
It's such an important decision to make. And I will tell you, one of the most difficult decisions that practices make in our industry. It's scary. There's a lot of thought that has to go into it, and if you don't do it the right way, you could lose all your patients. So it's a pretty serious topic right now, especially now with the insurance reimbursements being lowered across the board with many of the plans, and so the practices are taking a really big financial hit. So it's really time to consider where you are in that relationship and where you really want to go.
It's interesting because you've been speaking, consulting, educating dentists and teams for 23 years.
Long time.
Jameson has been in the industry as a company for 32 years. And over those years, my goodness, the landscape has really, really changed. And for those of you out there listening that haven't been in the industry this long, you may be like, oh, you lucky dogs, what was it like back in the day? But, for now, what we're seeing is this continuous shift, and truly, two paths diverged in a woods, and what path are you going to take? And it really has to come down to what I love that you say as a part of the pathway that we just recorded with you is, it really has to align with your why.
Yes. You have to be very passionate about why you're making the decision. As soon as you can wrap your heart around your why, the decision becomes fairly easy, but you still have to pay very close attention to the process in making that decision. But ultimately, back in the day when insurance was even invented, I think that was the 70s, insurance, there really weren't in-network plans. It was just insurance coverage, and it typically covered most of the patient's dental care for a 12-month period. And now those maximums haven't changed, not because of the insurance industry. It's because of employers' budgets not wanting to pay high premiums for those benefits, so the maximums don't change. But the cost of that dentistry has changed greatly. So somewhere along the line, there became this process of, well, if you become an in-network provider and you make a contractual deal with us to lower your fee-for-service fee, you'll be able to get more patients. And so it really was used as an avenue to acquire more patients. but it became the beast. What was a really great idea, and maybe is still a great idea for some practices can manage it very, very well. But the ones who are really getting caught off guard and caught by surprise with the insurance industry lowering reimbursements and increasing adjustments have really taken a hit in the pocketbook. And that's when it becomes a really important decision. Where's your tolerance level? When is it time? Okay, so now you've made the decision, it's time, but oh no, how do we do it?
I know that you work with a lot of teams in retreats and in your mastermind sessions with them on how to do this, how to make these decisions and how to go about that. At Jameson, we help practices step out of relationships and PPOs all the time. But I think you and I both know that sometimes that process and that buy-in and releasing the fear of the what if with practices can be very difficult.
Yes.
What's some of the pushback that you see and experience that you've overcome with practices? Let's bust some myths here,
right?
Of what may be preventing practices from making really healthy decisions about
this.
It's
the noise that plays in your team's heads, where they're very, very sensitive to what they feel the patients want and need. So it's a perception. So that you're going to get the pushback when the team has a general perception that it's going to cost the patient a lot more money. So one of the myths is it's not going to cost the patient a lot more money. Insurance reimbursement typically increases when a dentist changes the relationship with how they work with them. So they're no longer in network. So they've removed the barrier of having to charge a lower fee. They charge the fee for service fee. Typically, the reimbursement will catch up to that fee-for-service fee. So that's one of the myths, is that your patient's out-of-pocket expense isn't going to go up by the amount. That's the hesitancy, by the amount that the practice is writing off. The practice is writing off those dollars because the dentist signed a contractual relationship with that insurance company to lower their fees, therefore increasing adjustments.
And, I think it's something that, I keep going back. You're going to have to go on the grow pathway to get all the details, people, or go see Lois in a lecture or bring her in for a retreat. But, something just to touch on that I really, that resonated to me was talking about the reality of the write-offs. A lot of decisions are being made or not being made in dental practices without the practices doing the due diligence to understand really what your relationship with these plans are. And, some of the most painful realizations are when a practice is, you may be meeting your production goals, you're high-fiving each other, you're thinking, this has been a great month, and then bam, you're cut off at the knees because you just wrote off 50% of what you produced that month. You worked your rear end off for that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that was really, you had some really aha moments in that part of your presentation of that I know that you teach on the regular.
Yeah, I mean the twofold analysis is analyzing all the data of production collections and adjustments. But then if you're going to dig a little deeper in it and really analyze the by code adjustment percentage, most practices realize that they're struggling when the doctor goes to pay the bills at the end of the month and suddenly, hey, we've produced all this money. How come I don't have enough money in my bank account? Because they haven't really gone in and done a deep dive as to which plans they're adjusting the most dollars off on and which ones are not allowing the benefit when the benefit should be there. It puts the practice in a position, kind of a hypothetical position that the team tends to adopt. So it's like the action causing, the thing causing how to react to everything based on inaccurate data. So the team starts having these conversations with the patients on, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. Your insurance doesn't allow it. And then the practice is at risk for diagnosis and treatment plan discussions based on what the insurance does and doesn't cover, which of course is not in the patient's benefit. It's almost, I would equate it to like a scare tactic. And that then drives the mindset. And that's where you're going to get a lot of pushback from the team with that mindset, because they're so entrenched in what insurance will and won't cover, what maximums are going to happen, and when they're maxed out or whether there's a deductible. It drives the conversation instead of letting the practice drive the conversation with what is truly in the patient's best interest.
And it was interesting. I was just kind of reminiscing back just then of at the last ADOM conference, I was on a panel and you were the moderator of the panel. And I always say, why don't they just put all the insurance speakers and experts on the panel? Because the questions are always about reimbursements or being a network or changes that are being made to the agreements. And you found yourself working a little harder.
I did. I found
you
myself being on the
anticipated
panel and being the moderator.
But
That's true.
and the point always is again, your practice vision can be whatever you want it to be. And if being in network is important to you and how you want to care for patients, that's great. You do you. But understanding what that means and what that's going to have to mean in terms of how you run your practice
For sure.
is important. And
you're going to have to make financial decisions on your expenses. A lot of practices make these decisions based on where their overhead starts or stops. If they paid attention to the overhead part first, they would make different decisions. As an example, the gross production. So I wish I had a little roadmap here. I'll use my hand puppets. Gross production is driven by overhead. Overhead, is driven by gross production. Net collections pays the overhead. So when the gap gets bigger because you're writing off more dollars, you're not putting as many dollars in the bank, but your expenses are actually going up because you have to do more dentistry in less time. That's what the average practice thinks. Well, I'll just do more dentistry in less time and then it'll be fine. But the more dentistry you do in less time, the more times you're turning a room around, the more times you're using your sterilization equipment, the more times you're using your instruments, the more products you're using, the longer sometimes you have to have your hours. Well, all of that is overhead. So the minute you increase your productivity, if you're in network, you're actually increasing your overhead more than if you were not in network. So if you start running on this terrible treadmill. And so there's another myth or misconception is you can just see more patients in less time, do more dentistry in less time, and it'll offset, but it actually creates a worse nightmare in the overhead department. So that's one of the myths.
Yeah, so, busting these myths, getting over that obstacle that might be in your mind or in your team's mind. Also, do the due diligence, run the reports, audit your plans, figure out the reality of your practice's relationship with these plans. How many patients are on these plans, what the write-offs are. Do your homework so that no matter what the decision it is that you make, it's an educated decision and it's a decision based upon the reality of your practice numbers.
Right. When you know the real numbers, you can make informed decisions.
Yes.
If you are guessing what the numbers are, you're going to be wrong 100% of the time.
Lois, to kind of shift gears a little bit, something, you did some really great, you do some great education on how to execute a strategy if you want to go out of relationship with a plan, and the steps to take and so on. But something, that might be challenging for practices, I would feel, is consistency in executing that plan and strategy. So what would be some recommendations or some advice you would give, or places in the day or the week or whatever to keep a team on? Let's say they decided they are going to go out of relationship with some plans.
Okay.
And the strategy, the process is in place. How do they stay consistent in executing that process?
Well, the secret to that, and I happen to know that is the Jameson philosophy as well, is to have a really good, effective morning huddle, to introduce the starting of the management of changing that relationship in your morning huddle. So what does that mean by that? You identify the key patients who may have those plans. Let's say you've decided to change your relationship. It's, here it is January 18th, or let's say it's January 1st, and now you want to choose 6 months from now. So July 1, you want to opt out of in-network status with 3 different plans. So you identify the patients that are on your schedule who have each of those plans in your morning huddle. So then you identify in the morning huddle which of these patients are we going to have this really important discussion with. And you start having the discussion as soon as the patient checks in. Please don't send a letter right away. Please don't call the patients right away because you are not in control of their reaction. it is very, very important to have face-to-face conversations with your patients. In order to do that, you really want to have an earnest effort at identifying which patients on the schedule today are we going to have that conversation with. What that does is it lessens the feeling of being overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, we have 500 patients we're going to have a conversation with. Oh, maybe 5 of those patients are on your schedule today. It chunks it down into much more manageable.
One bite at a time.
Yeah, and here's the really great outcome of that is the first 5 patients you have the discussion with, you're going to be terrible at the discussion. You give yourself permission to fail at the discussion. But as you start doing this every single day, you get really, really good at it. The reason to do it in the morning huddle, that's when the entire team is available. And your patients might be asking insurance-related questions chairside. So it puts the assistants at ease, or the hygienist at ease, or even the dentist at ease when the patient introduces this topic. Maybe you're not going to have the total discussion with the patient chairside, but you're going to be able to build a bridge to the person in your administrative team that has managed that discussion very successfully. So many times it's, your discussion is in the handoff. Patient is going to ask, I hear you're dropping me. Please don't say those words. So you can respond to the patient then by saying, no, we're not dropping you. We're changing our relationship with how we work with your plan. The intention for us, our why, is we want to make sure that no third party gets in the way of your important discussions in treatment. And once you that's the passion behind the why that I talk about all the time. If you don't understand and can't wrap your heart around your why, the words aren't going to come easily.
And I love that recommendation of utilizing and maximizing your time in the huddle to stay on track, to make it feel like an attainable goal, to have these conversations, to keep it at front of mind for everyone. It's just such a perfect example of how to more successfully utilize the time of a daily huddle. I think a lot of daily huddles die because they aren't being used appropriately. That time isn't being executed effectively. I mean, we're just
It's a schedule review.
Right, reading the schedule to each other. Instead of having the intention of utilizing that time to get all hands on deck, get all eyes on the prize, and make that the most successful day possible as a total team effort. And using that, if you are in process or setting a goal to and setting an action into place to change a relationship with the plan, to keep that at front of mind. It's just like an internal marketing effort that you may be trying to press.
For sure.
Or asking for referrals, or whatever the case may be. It's just such an important time to remind everyone we're all in this together. Here are the people we need to make sure that are coming in today. We have a conversation with them.
That fully understand, right?
Relationship first, patient-focused practice, and that's a great utilization of that time.
And it's the best opportunity to really get the team to buy in to the process. And the patients are there. Some patients will push the envelope of, why are you dropping my insurance? Oh, I'm so sorry that's what you think. We're not. We are just getting, we're letting the third party not influence our discussion. So we've changed our relationship with how we work with that insurance. And always ask, what questions can we answer for you about this? Because if you honor the patient in that way, they won't leave you for the wrong reasons. For the wrong some patients are going to choose to exit your practice, but you really want to make sure that you have a good backup plan of helping them back into the practice, the good ones.
So, for those of you that are perked up and are like, okay, this was the pep talk I needed to hear. Remember, get really solid on your why, your practice vision, make the decisions based upon what's best for you, your practice, your patients, and your entire team will be able to stand firm and be confident in that decision, in those conversations. Work on those conversations, those communication skills. Lois does a great job of giving recommendations and verbal skills of how to do that. Make the decision based on the evaluation of your practice numbers. Make those educated decisions once you've done that work, and then make sure that you're making time in the day to all stay front of mind, stay ready, and making sure we're accomplishing this goal one patient conversation at a time.
Yes.
I'm super, super excited that we are launching on Grow, the new pathway featuring Lois as your presenter and educator on how to navigate these PPO relationships, how to do your due diligence and make those decisions, and talk about verbal skills and how to engage in those conversations with your patients. So Lois, thank you so much for doing that with us.
I'm very
partnering with us
passionate
on
about
that.
this subject matter,
Yes.
obviously. So I welcome any questions, conversations, challenges. Feel free, double dog dare challenge me. I do it all the time with others.
Yes.
So I'm happy to make myself available to answer any questions that that practices have about this process.
Love that. So you can find the pathway at grow.jmsn.com. But Lois, how can they reach you directly to talk more in depth about your retreats or
Sure.
About the services you provide?
So my email is lois.banta57@gmail.com. You can call me at 816-223-3529, or you can go to my website, ljbseminars.com. There's a lot of information there about masterclass retreats, regular retreats at a location of your choice. I'm doing a wonderful City Slicker retreat with Kathy Jameson, which sells out every time we have one coming up in May. There will be information on my website about those courses as well.
Wonderful. And if you've never seen Lois present or even in lecture form, I encourage you to go find her and let her just give you the gift of her knowledge and passion and expertise. It's worth your time and effort. So, my friend, thank you for joining me for this episode. I appreciate you.
A true pleasure.
And thanks to all of you that continue to be a part of our Jameson Files community. We're so glad you're here and so grateful for you. Be well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.